my storytelling really shows up in both my academic and creative work. My purpose through academia and digital storytelling is to make visible the stories of people whose identities have been denied a spotlight. As a Southerner, as a Black woman, as a queer Black woman, it's like a mass presenting queer Black woman, my experiences don't always end up in the center of what we know about people and what our experiences are. And that has always led me to want to make folks see me. And when I say me, those of us whose identities just don't get a spotlight, whose identities don't get centered. And if their identities don't get centered, then their stories don't. And the stories that are the experiences of our lives, they matter. They count for something. So that's a thread through my personal journey, through my academic journey, and my creative journey. This is about visibility, power, and representation for me. I got married in 2017, and we so not everybody knows this. We got married like officially in 2016 because I was having surgery in December of 2016. And because Donald Trump was coming into office, we didn't know what things would be like by the time we had our like public ceremony in October of 2017. And so we're just like, let's go ahead and do this so that if there are decisions that need to be made in the heat of the moment, that Blair is my lawful wife and she can make those decisions. And we weren't sure what it was going to look like to wait. That was a real concern. That's what I mean about queer stories, like this stuff being real. We had to make significant decisions at that time to try to protect ourselves. And then we thought we were in the clear, when 2020 came around and Biden was elected. But the states then started to elect more conservative representation in government. And so some of those thinking we could move to Alabama and be safe, or thinking we could move to Georgia or Virginia, South Carolina or North Carolina and be safe, like all of
Mhm.
that was flipped on its head after 2022. What became clear to me was the institutions do not hold, for one. So we have to find some other way of accessing power, other way of understanding power, protecting our communities, figuring out how else to get ahead. And then, it's just, I think the other part is just that we're vulnerable. I thought I was safe. I thought to some degree I was safe thinking about privilege earlier. I got a doctorate. I live in a fairly blue area. I feel
Mhm.
fairly safe. So I should be able to go anywhere. I'm married now. The Constitution has said it's cool. It's fine. But that stuff could be ripped away just as quickly as an election. 2020 was Biden, quote unquote, fixed it, some of it. And then just 2 years later, we're back in a vulnerable position. And so though I've never forgotten those things. And that's changed why I'm committed to telling the stories of people who look like me, people whose experiences are similar or align or mirror mine. Because there has to be some other way to begin to build power, to think about community absent these national institutions. And in fairness, other sort of local organizing groups, and we're much better about it now, but in the past, you might have Black women, Black men organizing for Black political power, but they're not including queer folks. They're not, when they're
Yes.
talking about family, they don't mean a family that looks like mine. And so that's the reason why it became so important to me to think about visibility and its relationship to power, and think about culture, visibility, culture, and that relationship to power. So that's how I arrived here.
This is Social Justice Origin Stories. I'm your host, Rolando Tompkins Jones. Social Justice Origin Stories is a storytelling project that highlights personal stories and defining moments that have inspired individuals and organizations to labor for equity and social justice. Through truth-telling, the honest sharing of their experiences, storytellers teach us about themselves, enabling us to learn about ourselves and our world through their stories. By reconnecting with pivotal moments of activation in their lives, they invite us to do the same. At Social Justice Origin Stories, we believe that there's power in storytelling and lived experience is experience. There's room enough for all of us to do this work. There are many ways to contribute, and our contributions don't need to be the same. We can enter and remain engaged in the work using the gifts that are special to us while supporting others and using theirs. We have the capacity to grow and change for the better when exposed to new information and experiences. We believe in our inherent worth and capabilities, and we possess the power to inspire and create change within ourselves and others. We can transcend the confines of the status quo to imagine and design more equitable and humanizing systems. For today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Monique Gamble. Thank you for being here with us, Dr. Gamble.
First, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for having me. I am deeply honored to share this space with you and have this conversation. And call me Monique. I'm Monique to you, always. Who am I? Let's see. I'm a queer Black woman from the Deep South, born and raised in Alabama. I'm a storyteller and an assistant professor of political science at a public HBCU in Washington, D.C. My storytelling really shows up in both my academic and creative work. My purpose through academia and digital storytelling is to make visible the stories of people whose identities have been denied a spotlight. As a Southerner, as a Black woman, as a queer Black woman, it's like a mass presenting queer Black woman, my experiences don't always end up in the center of what we know about people and what our experiences are. And that has always led me to want to make folks see me. And when I say me, those of us whose identities just don't get a spotlight, whose identities don't get centered. And if their identities don't get centered, then their stories don't. And the stories that are the experiences of our lives, they matter. They count for something. So that's a thread through my personal journey, through my academic journey, and my creative journey. This is about visibility, power, and representation for me. That's me.
Visibility, power, and representation, those stories matter. Your stories matter. And from you sharing your story here with us, I truly believe that others will see that they matter as well. So thank you. Thank you
Mm,
so much for being here.
my
As you're
pleasure.
reflecting on your social justice origin story, you cited the 2016 election and the 2022 midterm election.
2016 really changed the trajectory of my professional approach. It changed the trajectory of my understanding of things that I thought I was sure about and clear about. My dad used to say when I was growing up, my dad would always say, "Get you a job in government. You'll always have a job." And so I think in some way that's part of the reason that I ended up going to grad school, ended up getting a doctorate in political science or American government. And so there's a part of me through him that always respected the continuity of American institutions, the strength and the continuity of American institutions. I am a person who I recognize that the ways that American institutions have been used to wield power and to wield oppression is awful. And those are the things that we're disrupting and trying to fix. And those institutions have also been strong. They've held, despite having some unsavory actors, having people who had nefarious aims. The institutions have at times been able to course correct. If you got good people in there, the institutions can course correct. 2016 showed me that the institutions were not strong enough to hold where enough people could look at a racist, a sexist, a misogynist, a xenophobe and say, yeah, him. People tell you like, oh, they were the same. It's like Hillary was just as bad as Trump was, but she wasn't. She wasn't. And I can understand how like people have their own personal dissatisfaction with the Clintons. You can have your own personal dissatisfaction with Hillary Clinton. It's fine. I don't debate people's personal affections for candidates. But when the rubber meets the road, there's a policy perspective under one of them that would have been significantly different than the policy perspective of the other one. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm thinking about the value of political candidates. So much of what we've worked for under the Obama administration, and I get that everything else, I want to make the caveat here that everything I'm saying is in the best possible scenario. I'm not saying any of these people are above reproach, mistakes that have been made, or that critique and criticism isn't fair. Absolutely, they are fair. We should continue to hold politicians' feet to the fire. All of that's true. And at the end of the day, one person is a better choice than the other person. And to know that the person that millions, tens of millions of people voted for was the one who represented everything that our institutions say they're against, the marginalizing of multiple groups of people in our documents, in the rhetoric that we use to talk about our political culture. We say that's not us, but we chose someone who represents the absolute worst of everything we claim we stand for. And when the institutions that are meant to provide those checks and balances, and they had provided checks and balances before, they've done it. They've worked before. They did not in this case. And this was presumably one of the worst examples and one of the easiest examples to provide checks and balances for. Donald Trump was trash in a lot of ways. Easily, you don't have to uncover it. When the dude comes down the escalator and says Mexicans are terrible, and if they're not bringing their best people, they're like rapists and whatever. This is how you introduce your candidacy, and you go on to win after the first Black president was president. Like that, there's something about that just turns your stomach. And so that's what it was for me. I will never forget. I was at an election watch party, election night 2016. And I remember as Ohio got later and later into the night, we're getting into 11 o'clock and there's still no call for Ohio. I was like, okay, we're not really doing this, are we? And then the next day, what we were doing was done. And it was just, that was it. That I've never gotten over that. I never got over that. And that had some meaningful implications. So I'm saying all that to say, like, all right, so 2016, we get through those 4 years barely because we end up with COVID at the end of it. And there are other issues that come up over the course of that presidency. And I remember like around 2020, 2021, maybe, my wife and I were looking to buy a house. And for the first time, we were considering moving down south because the housing market during that time was a free for all, but the interest rates were super low. So we were like, okay, let's give it a shot. And we're looking at Alabama, where I'm from, which is absurd. I never would have thought that I would consider moving back to Alabama, but we did. We looked at Georgia. We looked at North Carolina, South Carolina. All of those were on the table because housing was cheaper. So we're like, okay, let's give it a shot. And then here comes 2022, the midterm elections, where there are more conservative governors who were elected. I got married in 2017, and so not everybody knows this. We got married like officially in 2016 because I was having surgery in December of 2016. And because Donald Trump was coming into office, we didn't know what things would be like by the time we had our like public ceremony in October of 2017. And so we're just like, let's go ahead and do this so that if there are decisions that need to be made in the heat of the moment, that Blair is my lawful wife and she can make those decisions. And we weren't sure what it was going to look like to wait. That was a real concern. That's what I mean about queer stories, like this stuff being real. We had to make significant decisions at that time to try to protect ourselves. And then we thought we were in the clear, when 2020 came around and Biden was elected. But the states then started to elect more conservative representation in government. And so some of those thinking we could move to Alabama and be safe, or thinking we could move to Georgia or Virginia, South Carolina or North Carolina and be safe, like all of that was flipped on its head after 2022. What became clear to me was the institutions do not hold, for one. So we have to find some other way of accessing power, some other way of understanding power, protecting our communities, figuring out how else to get ahead. And then it's just, I think the other part is just that we're vulnerable. I thought I was safe. I thought to some degree I was safe, thinking about privilege earlier. I got a doctorate. I live in a fairly blue area. I feel fairly safe. So I should be able to go anywhere. I'm married now. The Constitution has said it's cool. It's fine. But that stuff could be ripped away just as quickly as an election. 2020 was Biden, quote unquote, fixed it, some of it. And then just 2 years later, we're back in a vulnerable position. And so though I've never forgotten those things. And that's changed why I'm committed to telling the stories of people who look like me, people whose experiences are similar or align or mirror mine, because there has to be some other way to begin to build power, to think about community absent these national institutions. And in fairness, other sort of local organizing groups, we're much better about it now. But in the past, you might have Black women, Black men organizing for Black political power, but they're not including queer folks. They're not, when they're talking about family, they don't mean a family that looks like mine. And so that's the reason why it became so important to me to think about visibility and its relationship to power, and think about culture, visibility, culture, and that relationship to power. So that's how I arrived here, in a much more serious and committed way.
even as you share that the power of visibility and storytelling, even as you share how you would see Black folks organizing in ways, and then you shared, hey, but when they're talking about family, they didn't mention mine. It made me also think about how you talked about institutions like, oh, wait a minute, like we all supposed to be a part of this struggle here.
Mhm.
That's supposed to
Mhm.
hold too. But also recognizing and seeing that in some of the storytelling and the advocacy, organizing and appeals for humanity, the various ways people go about doing that, you just see it and recognizing, wait a minute, they're not including us. They're not talking about us.
One of the most resonant pieces of art that has stuck with me over the years was I went to see I'm a fan, as many of us are, of James Baldwin. James Baldwin's work and just his brilliant mind. And we went to see I Am Not Your Negro, the documentary around his life a few years back. And I remember him thinking about during that time, civil rights era, having the Black Panther movement, having Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Coalition. I always forget what the last C is for. NAACP. And I want to say there was another organization, but I can't remember what it was. But let's just take those three. And he basically shot them all down using his own identities. And then it stuck with me. So he's saying, I couldn't be a part of NAACP because I was poor. NAACP didn't really recognize class in a way that would have included me. So the SCLC, I'm gay. So like, I'm not going to be able to be a part of that either. He's talking about like Black Panthers or Black Panthers and thinking of themselves in a Black supremacy sort of mindset, white supremacy with Black supremacy. I'm not with.
Not
And
with
so
that.
all of those different layers of his own identity call into question some of the most meaningful and most significant organizing movements for Black political power, for racial justice. And they didn't have a real solid, consistent, coordinated, respectful component that included groups that I think folks considered undermining of the movement. But you can't have gays as a part of a Christian leadership code outside of Bayard Rustin. Oh, and
Yep.
he's not
Yep.
like telling everybody, you know what I'm saying? You can't have, if class is an issue, then we're talking about race and we're not talking about class as it relates to NAACP. Black supremacy is not, that doesn't get us anywhere. This notion of supplanting one form of dominance with another is bad all the way around. It's a level of like critique for these mainstream movements. I thought that was so insightful to me. And so coming at it from the underside, it just feels more liberatory to me. So that's the reason I'm approaching it from this very personal perspective, because I reside in those margins. Folks who were, or years ago, folks who were organizing, they're not looking at a person like me or a story like mine that could be the center, could be like the motivating force for this work. And I'd like to, change that, as others are for sure.
Okay. So you're a storyteller. It shows up in your academic and creative work, your purpose through academia and digital storytelling is to make visible the stories of people whose identities have been denied a spotlight. You shared about the 2016 election, the 2022 midterm election, in terms of how those things influenced how you show up today. You talked about focusing on power and cultural power as that relates to visibility. What are some of the ways that you do that in your work now? How does that show up for you? Just the various ways where that focus shows up in your practices and the ways that you work as an academic, as a storyteller.
Mhm. They're starting to bleed together now.
Ooh,
And
okay.
we're in the nascent stages of it. But for example, I started teaching a class in the spring, University of the District of Columbia, which is where I work. We have general education kind of program. All the students have to take a class called Discovery Diversity. And professors have autonomy in how they teach that course. I decided that I wanted to use the Discovery Diversity course to focus on LGBTQ visibility in media and what that means in terms of just being able to see this group living, be they fictional stories or documentaries and like whatever it is that was happening at that time. What difference does that make ultimately to have a better sense of this group of people, what their experiences were, and how it relates to whatever's happening now? What was interesting about that is when I pitched the class, they were fine with it. Everything was cool. But then when got ready to teach it, there was some pushback. I had pushback from a few students. In fact, one of them hit me up and was like, I like the way you teach, but can you just change the focus? There's many ways to think about diversity. So you don't have to just talk about like LGBTQ diversity. And I remember thinking, like, if there are many ways to talk about diversity, then why can't I talk about it this way? Why can't you see your own diversity through this lens?
Mhm.
And the pushback that I got was to me that like I needed to teach it. We needed to be able to have this class because like folks can see themselves through other marginalized identities, but when it comes to queerness, they're like, nah, that part is not me.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm intentional about how I teach that class too. Like LGBTQ history and visibility is mostly the work of white people, but and white gay men. If you went just out in the world and asked folks to give you a sense of the history of visibility of queerness, they would by and large, unless they're like a black or brown person, they're probably going to tell you about Stonewall and about whatever white people experienced. And it's just so much more story here. You also don't get a lot of perspective from like lesbians or queer women. And so even as I taught this class, that's about a marginalized group, I took it even further and I don't focus on queerness in the context of whiteness. It is black and brown and it is primarily women. It became a fascinating experience. Like by the time we got to the end of the semester, first of all, I don't teach it for the purpose of like people coming out. That's never my goal. But people need that space to understand that it is okay if that is a part of your identity, or if you were
Mhm.
arrested and you want to ask some questions or you want to like play it out. People need that space to feel okay, to feel safe, to explore. And more people than we know or think are curious about the exploration.
Mhm.
That's the part that's not political. It's not about signing legislation. It's not about who has what rights. The ways that people naturally are is curious about queerness sometimes. And they don't
Mhm.
really have a space to be able to talk about that. And because I've created this class and because this is a topic that I'm comfortable with and I enjoy talking about it, and I'm never talking about it from a perspective of you have to accept like gayness, or it has to be like the top of mind for you. You have to consider it in all the things that you're doing. I never talk about it from that perspective. There's no like mandate on how you think about it, except that you got to consider it because this is what people's lived realities are. That is enough to just create that space of safety for folks to be able to explore. And it was a wonderful experience to have that. Where the group that I find to be like the least receptive, or that I'm expecting to be the least receptive, is usually like straight black men and older black women. And
Mhm.
both of those groups came around, both of them. By the time we
Mhm.
got to the end of the semester, it was like, I didn't know that. And now that I know that, doesn't mean that it's gonna like fully change everything. I might still have some questions. I might still have some discomfort, but I'm in a place now where I can be curious, where I can be open without being judgmental, where I can share what I've experienced or what I know now with other people and engage in the conversation to ask a question about, okay, why do you use these pronouns? So you're transitioning? What's that about? Like, how did that happen? As opposed to, I don't want to talk about it. I take that as progress. And that kind of stuff doesn't
Mhm.
happen unless somebody has the guts to say, no, we're talking about this. I'm going to
That's right.
show it. You're going to see it. You're going to watch. There's a wonderful documentary series from Apple TV. It's called Visible, out on television. It's wonderful. I use it at the beginning of the class. But the thing that I point out to my students is we watch like 2 episodes. You have to get maybe like an episode and a half before you get to a queer person of color. That's what I mean. You know what I mean? You've been
Mhm.
reading or learning about like queerness, but it took you an hour and a half before they present you someone who looks like y'all in this classroom. What does that tell you? That the history of queerness doesn't start in like 1969, and it doesn't start with white people, but doesn't. But if
That's
this is
right.
the history, that's missing something, and that sparks people's curiosities. First of all, I didn't know it was this old, and secondly, why aren't we here? And so
Mhm.
then people become aware of the power of storytelling and the power of visibility in terms of how you begin to know what you begin to know about what life experience is. If you never saw it, then you don't know. Doesn't mean it wasn't there. Just means that nobody made it for you. Nobody showed it to you. So,
Nobody nobody made it for you, nobody showed it to you. As I'm listening to you
mhm,
share the story, I'm thinking of a couple things. One, when you first talked about the pushback, I was thinking I was reminded of that new but old messaging around, "I agree with what you're doing, but I don't agree with the methods by which you're
mhm,
doing it." You know what I mean? So can we do it in a
mhm,
way that doesn't make me feel uncomfortable? So I thought about that, the kind of
mhm,
pushback and how that can happen individually, but then also institutionally in some ways. And I also thought about I was reminded of when you were talking too about our socialization and the ways that we're
mhm,
taught and the way storytelling and the power of thinking about. I'm really appreciating everything you're sharing around visibility and the importance of it and just the power of thinking about who gets to tell the stories that we hear often and
yeah,
how that influences our ability to recognize that other stories are possible, that more stories are
mhm,
possible than what we've been given. So I think about how education can be liberatory and in a way, and I'm listening to you describe it like, okay, I didn't necessarily and I'm paraphrasing, but it's, okay, I didn't necessarily set the class up to be a space where folks would come out, but it also sounds like you created the psychological safety, you created the space for folks to be able to do that. And so on that end, I'm getting from the story the liberatory power of storytelling and education in the ways that it can, yeah, liberate folks from those messages of inferiority, and then also when you talked about the pushback from some of your students, some of the black men in the class, and then who was the other group? What's the other group you mentioned?
older Black women,
And older black women in the class.
mm,
First, like
older straight Black women.
older
Mhm,
straight black women. Yes, let's be clear
mhm,
about that. So from the straight older black men in the class
mhm,
and the older straight black women in the class, getting that initial resistance there, but then also over the course of that sustained communication together, the sustained learning, engaging with things that might push back against what they thought they knew, it's like over time here, wait a minute. And like you said, it's not necessarily there's still more work to be done.
mm,
But in that course and in the storytelling and your education, your teaching played a role in pushing back against, in some ways, those messages of superiority as well. I expect to be, when we talk about diversity, I expect to be, I'm a black man, I expect to be represented, right? And
yeah, mhm,
calm down with all this other stuff. And so that
mhm,
messaging too, even though we might have some marginalized identities in other ways, sounds like you sharing that story, it was also a way of pushing back against that narrative, is that
yeah,
I deserve to be centered in ways that y'all do not. Even though we share some
yes,
affinity, when we talk about centering and we talk about equity and diversity, oh, there's many ways to talk about diversity and inclusion. I want to be centered as the black
mhm,
man, that kind of thing, and chipped away at that. So I
percent,
like how you said you counted that as success too, as growth too, being able to do that because I think it
yeah.
is.
It 100%, like, you nailed it here, and that's why I really appreciated that you elevated that point in kind of the intake. How do people who exist within these margins also have privileges that show up? And that was a big part of it. We're talking about, like, folks like, Sylvester James, who was king of disco, queen of disco. He's very gender fluid in the '70s and '80s, and getting straight Black men to understand that Sylvester might be a slightly more difficult example just because he was gender fluid and sort of gender queer, and he would play around in these spaces, very effeminate, but he would say, and there's an interview that he does with, Joan Rivers, and she called him a drag queen. And she's not trying to be offensive in calling him a drag queen, but that's how she understood it at that time. And he's, girl, I'm not a drag queen. I'm me. I'm Sylvester. Having that, one of the other like important revelations of teaching this course is allowing folks to understand that how people identify themselves is also incredibly personal. So just because you think this looks like that and you want to paint over it as all the same, it's not. In the same way that as folks who share as cisgender folks as like you and I are, we
Yeah,
might look at someone and say, oh, like that person is probably non-binary or that person might be trans, whatever. But we don't know how they identify. You don't know until they tell you.
that's
And
right.
it's like being able to respect what somebody else's journey is, how they understand and see themselves, and not centering in, I see it as this. Nobody care how you see it. This person told you.
It's said in that same level of very matter of
Mhm,
factness, that same level
mhm,
of, oh, I'm just 100% sure about this because I think so, so it is. But no,
mhm.
you're right.
That's a base level of respect and dignity that we all expect. And that's the privileging of certain parts of our identities that we would take that dignity away from another person because we don't believe they should have it. And if
Mm,
you tell me that your pronouns are she, they, I'm going to call you she. Or you tell me that whatever you tell me your pronouns are, I'm going to call you whatever makes me most comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Or you are a person who's living a trans experience and you tell me what your name is and I'm going to call you what I think your name should be. Like sitting with that, sit with the privilege that is inherent in that and really understand, why would you disrespect somebody in that way? If you told me your name was James and I continually call you Pete, you're going to be mad at me at a certain
You're
point
gonna be mad.
because
You're
it
gonna be
doesn't matter
mad.
what I think it is. Call you. And I enjoy beginning to break that down to say, what is it about you? What is it about your superiority that just won't allow you to call a person what they told you to call them? You would do that to you. Why okay in doing it to another person?
That's
So
right.
those conversations they're instructive. And I think it allows people to begin to see also that, damn, I might be being an asshole. That might be like acting up here. And beginning to question what's underneath that. What are you doing? What are you thinking? What do you think about this person who's a part of humanity just like you are? And we can start to interrogate that. So yeah, the other thing I'll say is I don't like to sugarcoat any of this. Discomfort is a part of it.
Part of it.
Discomfort is a part of growth. It is a part of learning. And so you're gonna be uncomfortable. If it's something you're unfamiliar with, you're gonna be uncomfortable. And that's once you engage, you're always gonna be uncomfortable until you get to know it a little bit, to peek behind the curtain to see what it is and see that it actually isn't so scary. This is another example of human existence. And it's not really that scary. Now that I know it, it doesn't even affect you in any particular way, except to respect another person's dignity and humanity. It's the fact that folks are afraid that they're going to be uncomfortable or any of that. They had to deal with it, except that you probably will be. But that's okay.
Yeah. Except that you probably will be, except that particularly when it comes to having some privilege in that, this is a space and time where you're feeling some discomfort. And you know what? But what I appreciate, we're talking about social justice origin stories, and you sharing the story about your class and some of the impacts that it has had and that your teaching has had on your students. In a way, I also feel like it has had an impact on their own social justice origin stories too. It's for
Mhm,
them. It's like, all right, so sometimes having classes like that, I know for me, both as a participant and then also as an instructor as well, sometimes students, depending on where we were in the class, sometimes as early as that first semester, after being exposed to right the importance of all the things you shared and challenging those dominant narratives, recognizing that there are larger stories outside of the ways that I've been centered. And now, in a way, they're starting
mhm,
to pay attention to some of that. And it can become harder
mhm,
sometimes to go
mhm.
back home to communities, to friend groups, to family, and other things, and listen to some of the same things. And you've had this different experience, and now you're thinking differently. And it has a way of setting people on a path to learn more and do more. So I really appreciate you
Mhm.
sharing that story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's a positive ripple for sure.
it's a positive ripple. Yeah, it's a positive ripple.
Mhm,
Yeah. Okay. And that storytelling in some ways connected to your academic work. When it comes to digital storytelling or other forms of
mhm.
storytelling, are there other ways that you exercise that focus on cultural power when it comes to storytelling outside of the academy?
I have Rolando, this like I have there's a filmmaker inside of me. And I'm trying my best to bring her out and make the thing and put the thing out. And so I have these ideas. I'm thinking I want to do like a documentary series and I want to profile Black lesbians Black lesbians, Black queer women. And one of the groups that I've been interested in lately is Black female barbers. And just because, again, my barber, mass presenting lesbian, she's fantastic. She's a fantastic barber. As you can see, I got
Clean,
my kid cut today.
clean. Come on.
And so I see every barber, all of my favorite barbers have been women. And all but one of them have been gay women. Um, the one before this one she was a femme. So she would cut hair. She had these like long almond shaped nails, like incredible. And I'm fascinated by what the experience is that these women, first of all, just as women in a male dominated profession and what that's one, and two, being gay women. And if you're like a femme who's in this like male dominated profession, unfortunately, like my old barber, she passed away at only 26 years old. She passed away in October
Mm,
2022. And
mhm.
she was kind of who inspired just these thoughts. And so when I make this documentary, it will be dedicated to Ashley. Ashley the barber was her name. Um, but what is it like? How do you grow up and decide as a woman that you're going to become a barber, for one? And then what does the experience of being queer, being a queer femme barber, what is that? Men hit on women regardless of what they look like. If you're mass presenting, men hit on women, period. And so I was always curious about what that was like for her as a femme. And then as a mass presenting lesbian who's a barber, like how does that work too? Like how do men engage with you? How do women who are bringing like their sons or maybe their daughters to you engage with you? What's that experience like? And that's a fairly niche concept because I think barbershop kind of things, barbershop and beauty shop things are just anchors of Black communities for one. So I'm already like into it. I love that. I went to the beauty shop with my mama for years. My dad and uncles and cousins went to the barbershop. Once I cut all my hair off in 2015, I was so excited to go to a barbershop and get my hair cut. And my first barber was a female barber. And so I'm curious about this intersection of Black culture generally, and then how women fit into male culture, which is what barbering has often
Mm-hmm.
been, and then where queer women fit into that. And so I think the probably one of the first like documentaries I'll make is that one because in part because my barber is excited to talk to me about
Wonderful.
it. So I have
Yeah.
there's someone in my pocket who I can explore this with. But then I think I want to make documentaries first because they're most accessible to me to tell the stories of or have queer women, Black queer women tell their own stories, how they arrived wherever they are. I want to put that out there. There's only, to my knowledge, there's only one mainstream major documentary about any like Black lesbians who are masculine centered. The documentary is called The Aggressives and it came out in 2005. It just did an update. It's like The Aggressive 25 years later, but that's the only one. We don't that so in this like pantheon of stories about a group of people, you got one about this one particular group. So that's it. That's the reason why I want to expose or present just more stories into the fold. We deserve it. You deserve it.
You deserve it. And
Mhm.
that is true to what you shared about just how you showing up, like
Mhm.
making visible stories of people whose identities have been denied a spotlight. Not
Mhm.
people who don't exist, not people who are just coming on the scene, but people who have been here, but their
Mhm.
experiences have been denied a spotlight. And you are utilizing the power of storytelling to change that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And
You're right.
there's the and thinking about just as an example here, like I mentioned earlier, how people's stories are personal. The Aggressives, like that documentary and doing it 25 years later is fascinating in that context. They're the late 90s, like early 2000s. Apparently, this is a term that is used by East Coast Black lesbians of color, aggressives. It meant masculine of center. As far as I know, in the South, they were called studs. Here in like the DMV, they're called doms, right? AGs or aggressives was, I think, something that is relegated to that area. But most of the women who were in that documentary in 2005, they identified as Black lesbians, cisgender. They are aggressives. Cut to 25 years later, and there's some of them, one of them, her, and I'm gonna use the term, I'm gonna use the she, her pronoun when I referred to her in 2005, because that's how she referred to herself. Marquise Balenciaga was identified as female at the time. She even says, I'm a lesbian woman. I love women, and I'm okay with that. Cut to like 2024, and Marquise is now a trans guy. He's very handsome. He's an actor. He does all kinds of stuff. And when I show that film to my students and they're able to see these women who are very clear about who they are in 2005, and then we see them, at least I think there's maybe two or three of them by the time we get to 2023, 2024, who've transitioned. They're very clear about who they are then as well. And so it's Marquise is just Marquise blows people's minds because he looks because of the way that he looks. But it sends home that message that people's identity journey, be it sexuality, be it gender, whatever, people's journey is their own. and you're not going to
Mm,
know it unless they tell it. You can't paint everybody over with the same brush. People have their own story, their own journey, and you can't know it until you hear it. You hear them
that's
tell
right.
it.
That's
So
right. That's right. You can't know it until you hear them tell it. Yeah, it goes back to, oh, wow, a lot of what you said around just the importance of visibility. Um, yeah, and you say, yeah, we deserve it. You deserve it. Deserve to have
mhm,
those stories told, deserve to have that complexity, those complexities known and realized. Yeah, deserve it.
for sure.
When you think about your own analysis and the things that have shaped how you approach your work as academic storyteller, who are some of the people or things, resources, it could be books as well, but who are some of the folks that have been significant to you on your journey?
The Black feminists are Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde is probably at the top of my list, and I don't agree all the way with some of Black feminist theory. What I do agree with is this notion of understanding that the dominant systems that we're all living under, all of us are living under, are problematic. And Black feminism is not meant to be in any way this oppositional force. This is not like a battle between like men and women for supremacy one way or the other. Black feminism teaches us that like all of these systems are making life difficult for all of us. And so when it critiques capitalism or when it critiques patriarchy, when it critiques heteronormativity, when it
Mm,
critiques like classes, that swath of people is millions of people who look all kinds of ways. But the group that gives you the picture, the group that's saying, ask us how we know that it's a problem is Black feminists. Because they're saying Black women have l- long lived at the bottom of all of these. And then Black feminism kind of recognizing the value of queerness as well. We know how terrible these systems are because it's been on our necks this entire time. We don't have the privilege of maleness, which patriarchy provides privilege for maleness, but
mhm.
understand also that patriarchy makes it difficult for you to be the kind of man that you want to be. Maybe you don't want to be the kind of man that patriarchy suggests or requires that you
That's
be,
right. That's
you
right.
know?
That's
And so
right.
it's like it's a fair critique that I think people boil down into it's racist or it is highlighting this group or that one. It's not. These are perspectives that are meant for all of us to see just how harmful the systems are for our society, generally speaking. And specifically within that, thinking of identity as not oppositional, thinking of ideas as not being oppositional, but instead as being a like yes and scenario instead of either this or that. Doesn't have to be that. So living like in that gray, exploring within that gray, exploring the complexities that exist within our identities and in our communities, like Black feminism, queer Black feminism creates the space to be able to do that. And it also gives us the language of love. Like you got to love folks, and loving folks means accepting who people are and also not putting people in harm's way and
Mm,
recognizing the value and the dignity of human beings and not trying to dominate people. That's Bell Hooks. Love does not require dominance. In fact, love does not exist within dominance. If
mm.
what you think, the way that you think you're gonna love me is to be a dominant person or to dominate over my life or my choices, you can't. That's not love. That's something
That's not
else.
love.
And so Black feminists have given me the language and the theory to understand some of this. Audre Lorde's kind of conceptions of difference are so important to me, conceptions of the power of womanhood. Bell Hooks and June Jordan's understandings of love, the power of sisterhood is important to me. And then I'll point to Toni Morrison and James Baldwin for the power of the word, the power of the written word, the
Mm,
language that we use. I'm thinking back to what we were talking about before we started and how folks will point to respectability. You got to look like this, you got to speak like this in order for people to respect you. If I could throw all of that out, I would. If you're
yes.
remarkable, you're remarkable. This is
Yes.
I tell people all the time when folks try to as a Southerner, people will try to demean the ways that Southerners might leave off the ends of words or the words might run together. You might say something in a very comfortable way and folks like, what you say? I didn't even understand what you said. Yes, you did. You did. But it's easy to point to language sounding a certain way and pretend that you just can't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to unlearn that stuff. We have
Yeah.
to unlearn that stuff. People communicate in so many different ways and the message gets across. And if the message gets across, then we've won. But if you keep trying to make people fit into these cogs that systems want us to fit into, what we will never win because the systems don't want us at the end of the day anyway. So even if you're
Mm-hmm.
perfect, you're still not good enough. Like Martin Luther King was
Yeah.
great at all of this. And somebody
Yeah.
still shot him,
And was suited
you know,
up and suited
suited
and
up.
booted. Yeah.
And them brothers
Mm-hmm.
they got beat over the head in the street. And they showed up
Yeah.
exactly how y'all said we supposed to show up. But the
Mm-hmm.
people don't care about that. They don't Nobody cares about respectability won't save you. It won't.
It
So
won't.
you might as well say what you need to say so that people can understand it. If people can understand you, boom.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to
Yeah.
be Teens English.
It doesn't have to be. Yeah. And that's what I say too. When it is your identity that has been weaponized and devalued, there's no amount of accomplishment or anything that's going to protect you
Mhm.
from the system trying to reassert itself. And so appreciate your sharing there. Yeah. And around language, I like how you said that too. It's like, you know, how folks act like they won't understand something. It's, yes, you do. You know what I was
Yes, you
saying.
do.
If it can be
Yeah.
communicated and understood, if you know what I'm saying, it's language, it is legitimate, it has rules,
Mhm.
just like any other way of dialect
Mhm.
has rules. What's this need of putting a cape on for upholding a particular kind of
Mhm.
English? Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. So, of the folks that you named, the folks in the ways of analyzing the world and what's happening in our lived experience that you named, what would you say in the moment in terms of gratitude for their impact on you? If you could think about a way to just any way to say thank you or appreciate, what would you say to speak to the impact that it had on you? They had on you, or and having on you too, because it's continued.
Mhm.
Your analysis continues. You're growing every day. But what would you say in terms of gratitude?
I think about James Baldwin's what is it? Ugh, I can't remember what the verb is. It's like the something of the artist. The responsibility of the artist is to tell the story. So my gratitude is that these works don't end with me. It's that like in moments like this where you and I are talking and you ask me and I lift up the names of these folks and the works that they've done and the theories that have resonated with me and I share them. I don't keep any of this. I don't gatekeep any of this
Mm,
because it's powerful enough. It's powerful and needs to be shared. And the more these perspectives, these questions, these challenges of norms, right? Like these expansions of ways of being and what to know, like that's my gratitude. And that's my I think that's my purpose in some way is to take what they've given me and to share it with folks and to say to force them to encourage them to share it as well. I say in every class, my goal is for y'all to take what we talk about here outside of this classroom. When you come back and you tell me that, you know what, I mentioned this to my friends the other day, or
mhm.
in one of the final reflections of my students, this young woman, she was saying that she said, this was the summer class that I taught. She said, I was talking to my grandmother, and my grandmother is the love of my life. That's the way she described her, which touched me. But she said that
Heartfelt.
my grandmother's the love of my life. She is a very like solid core Christian woman. And in the past, she always had some little funny, kind of negative side things to say about gay people. And after the class was over, one of the days, her grandmother like went into the norm, the way that she talked about things that she saw, and some of that had disparaging remarks about gay people. And she said she took that as an opportunity to just say, "Grandma, it's not like that. That is a win for me. That's
Yes.
why I'm here." She said, I don't know if it's gonna change. My grandma's 80 or whatever. She's, I don't know if it's gonna change everything. But now my grandmother is and she's asking me questions. That is a win. That's how. I don't fault people for not knowing something. Like I didn't know the things that I know now 20 years ago. But once you do learn something, there's an opportunity and there's almost like a charge to share it. You have to share it and ask other folks to share it and bring this stuff into your regular lexicon, your regular relationships. So we expand the ways of knowing for more people, ways of being for more people. That's my gratitude, I
Mhm. Okay. Okay. And that's what I was talking about earlier is, hey, students have been in your class, they've had this way, like either for, and perhaps sometimes perhaps even the discomfort from I'm used to being centered and I'm not at the center. And then also I'm sure at times, depending on what our relationship with internalizing oppression, and that could be some folks might also be like, oh, I'm not necessarily used to being centered in this way or these
think.
things going in this way. But to the degree that we've we've been exposed to the information, we've had some time to think critically about it, look at, like you said, take it out of the classroom. And those moments, like you just mentioned, it's wait a minute, it's not like that. And that has a rippling effect, even for,
Mhm,
I'm sure, even for the grandmother, even for the other folks that your students would do that to, who students would do that with. So,
mhm.
yeah, that's incredible. And that's a part of that liberation piece that I see education and storytelling playing such a critical role
Yeah.
in our lives of being. What keeps you coming back to storytelling? To what keeps you coming back? What fills your cup when you may be feeling depleted or ineffective? What are some of the things that, so it's a couple parts to it, the question is what
Mhm,
keeps you coming back every day? And then it sounds similar, but it's a little bit different. I'm trying to get at is what are some of the things, even though you continue to come back, what are some of the things that sustain you, I'll say, when you might be feeling all the feelings, overwhelmed,
mhm.
ineffective, maybe doubtful, those sorts of things.
What keeps me coming back is knowing what life was like for me as a 16-year-old, like 18-year-old girl who didn't know she was queer. She didn't know I didn't know it, but it was in there, but I didn't know it. But I felt so utterly invisible in terms of what was available to me, what was there, pop culture, what was around me. Like I had
Mm,
to fit how I wanted to see myself into what was there, but none of it really fit me. And so what keeps me coming back is trying to make a space for that girl who is 12 years old right now in Alabama or in Mississippi or in South Carolina who is, I don't get it. I feel like an alien. I feel like there's no place where I belong. There's no place that really gets me. And I feel like I'm the only one out here. I come back to show her that she's not. Like you may not, and you might not see it like in your community perhaps, but maybe there's an online community. Maybe like because I put this documentary out and you find it on Tubi
hey,
in 2 years, you know what I
hey,
mean?
yes, now we talking.
Like no
Mhm.
shade, you see it on Tubi, you're like, that girl that's 12 years old, like the pieces connect for her. And she's, it's not just me out here. What that does to somebody at an earlier age, like I want that for those girls. I didn't get that until much, much later in life. And it created a struggle for me in terms of my identity and in terms of knowing my own power and understanding my own power. And I want them to have that earlier. What builds my cup is stories like the ones that I share, the reflections of my students who say, yeah, I didn't know this. And now I look at the community differently. This is not about trying to make more people queer. It's not that. But what I do love is when people have a better understanding of themselves. When they say, like one of my students did, I've been dating boys. My mom keeps asking me on FaceTime, like, who am I dating? And all of that. And I keep trying to go out so that I have something to tell her when she calls me. But what I realize is I don't want to do that anymore. I realize that I probably am happier over here.
Mhm.
And just that realization of her own story, of her own journey, of her own self, like that's what keeps me coming back. I'm not trying to make more gay people, but I am trying to make more people who understand themselves and who are honest with themselves and feel comfortable to explore themselves and be true to whatever their identities are.
Mhm.
That's it for me.
Mhm. connecting those dots, being able to understand themselves more. And I was talking with another guest for an episode who talked about the relationship with between power and privilege and oppression and
Mhm.
trust, and talked about, and what I'm getting from your storytelling, I think that also connects over there, is also how the ways that those dots that are being connected through the environments that you are holding space for students in can also support them in building more of a strong and trusting relationship with themselves, right? Trusting
Mhm.
who they are,
Mhm.
trusting what they know to
Mhm.
be true about themselves, and
It
moving in that direction and feeling
yeah,
affirmed in moving in that direction.
feeling because it they may not get it anywhere else. So,
Yes.
yeah, this is my last,
No,
like,
come on. Hey,
story.
everything we
Okay.
want, everything you got. Yeah.
Okay, okay, cool.
Because
Give
seriously, you're sharing these things during our conversation, but in the same way as you're talking about connecting dots with the students, like there are folks who are going to be listening, connecting a lot of dots. You're talking about the
Yep.
girl that you want to know, and be affirmed in who she is sooner than it came for
Mhm.
you. That's gonna reach the people. Hey, any wisdom you
Okay.
have.
Alright,
I appreciate
cool.
you being here.
Just one more story. This is from from my spring semester again, and this is a completely different class. Young woman. I taught the Discovery Diversity class twice. One class was the evening class, one class was a day class. And the day class was that class was much more, they were much more reserved than the evening class was. So I didn't always know how things were landing in there. Folks, I'd ask questions, they'd be quiet. I was like, okay, so maybe it's not working quite the same way here. But near the end of the semester, one of the young women sat in the back of the class and she spoke low. She sat in the very back of the class, last row, but she always like raised her hand. She was always willing to like engage and stuff like that. Um, and so near the end of the semester, she finally came up to me and I've been struggling with my identity. I'm with my family and my family doesn't came out to like my grandmother and my like cousin or something like that. And her grandmother had a negative reaction, like a very viscerally like negative reaction to it. And so the cousin, in trying to make things better, was like, she don't mean that. She just means like she don't mean she's like gay or whatever. She know what she
Mm,
is because that's how her cousin in that moment was an ally or
mm,
the ally she had. And so it caused her to like double back and question herself because of how her grandmother reacted and then how the cousin basically minimized and tried to erase like this actually pivotal moment for this young woman where she is actually affirming herself and saying, no, this is who I am, but then she
mhm.
has to take it back out of
Yeah.
and so she and we were talking and I explained to her this is an opportunity for me to share. I didn't come out to my parents until I turned 30 and or just a little bit before I turned 30. And it was bad. It was bad. I'm an only child. I revere my parents. I love my parents very much. They were actually just here a couple weeks ago. But it took us about 8 years to get to a place where I could rebuild the relationship with my parents. And that it meant the world to me to begin to
Mhm.
rebuild that relationship. My parents were not at my wedding. They did not, my mother did not support anything. Like it was bad. But what
Yeah.
I explained to that young woman was that she got married in 2017. And then in 2018, my wife and I went home for Thanksgiving to my parents' house. And then in 2022, my wife's family from Detroit
From
came down
Detroit.
to Alabama and stayed at there's a guest house down the hill from my parents. So 2017, we were not cool. I didn't speak to my mother for most of the year of 2017. But by 2022, we had our first joint Thanksgiving. My wife's parents, her sister, our nephew, niece, cousins,
Wow.
all of them were there. And all of my family came. And my mom's family is like they're Jehovah's Witnesses. And we're all there around Thanksgiving to celebrate together. And so
Wow.
the story of yes, it could be bad, it can be ugly, but it doesn't have to stay that way. And that's what I mean about giving folks another story to hear, giving folks another reality that potentially exists out there for you. That one was big for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the stories have a way of humanizing us as well in a society that has said that is not possible. Can humanize folks, humanize us in the ways that we've been taught to hate ourselves, to give ourselves a little
Mhm.
bit more grace and visibility and knowing. And then also for those ways that, folks who don't share that identity have been taught to hate too. It's, wait a
Yeah.
minute. And like you were talking about with your students earlier, wait a minute. Oh, wait, maybe I wasn't really going about this the right way. Actually, no,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
because of that humanization, and storytelling has a really powerful effect of that. And then they become over time way storytellers of themselves to break that up too. So you said it earlier, but I like how you said it creates a ripple. And that's one of the greatest things I think about being an educator for sure, like having that kind of impact.
Pretty thing.
What would you hope listeners would take away from your story?
What's the hardest one? Uh,
And what actions would you encourage them to take?
what I would want folks to take away is there's something, the word that's here is grace and space. And I think what I mean by that is there's no one way to be. And there are a lot of ways that people are. And we have to have grace for those experiences. You have to create room for people to share who they are, what they know, and then have grace for what folks don't know and what people are still learning and what people need to unlearn. And I think change is possible in that. I think expansion is possible in that. And that's not to say that it's not, like I said earlier, it's not to say that it's going to be hard or that it's not going to be uncomfortable. It will be. And just accept that. But expanding what we know, expanding our ways of knowing, expanding like what we know about how people show up in this world. I think I want people to take that part away, to actively seek to give folks grace for how they show up in the world, to create space for disagreement and for unlearning and for maybe we're not all on the same page about our idea about change and revolution and action and all of that. But where are we alive? Do we both love our mama? You know what I mean? Is
Right.
there some little person that we care about leaving the world to and leaving the world in a better place than it was for us? Do we care
That's
about
right.
that? If
That's right.
that's what we care about, then let's make that the center and figure out how we unlearn things that are harmful for our little ones. And we don't have to all fit into the same box. We don't all have to like say we're the same thing. Like we could be different and still be like fighting towards the same goals. We could have different approaches towards the same goals and creating the space to explore what that is, explore like where we can work together and where we can unlearn things and let go of things that are harmful to all of us. I think, I think that's my best answer to that question for now. But like grace and space are like where I am. Create space for folks and give folks grace to catch up to wherever you are.
Finish the statement. I have
Okay.
3 finish the statement questions here. So I'll just say the thing and then whatever's on your mind. Okay.
Okay.
No wrong way to do this. Finish the statement. Okay. True social justice is possible when
Everybody's at the table.
my approach to social justice is shaped by
My blackness, my queerness, my womanhood.
understanding and sharing our social justice origin stories is important because
People need to know.
that's real.
Period.
That's real. People need to know.
People need to
That's
know,
real.
and you know what we've been through.
They need to know. So my hope is that these stories will exist for many years, hopefully further than I can even anticipate. But for future generations listening who might come across this many years from now, is there anything you'd like to share with them? Any knowledge, any wisdom, anything you'd like to share with them? What would you want them to know? Future generations who might stumble across this many years into the future.
I want them to know the work is ongoing. I want to thank them for taking the baton and going farther than we did. I want them to know they are descendants of a powerful beautiful, resilient people. And so there is nothing you can't do. There's nothing you can't do. Doesn't mean it won't take long. Doesn't mean that it'll be easy. Doesn't mean it won't be frustrating, but your roots are strong. Your roots are deep. And we are descendants of a powerful people. So you have everything you need to take this to the next step. And we love you. We love you. From afar, we love you.
Thank you, Monique Gamble. Or can I say Monique Alicia Gamble?
You can.
The incomparable Monique Alicia Gamble. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, for supporting this project, and through your storytelling, supporting someone else and connecting their own dots. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you, brother, for creating this space for us. You did this. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to Social Justice Origin Stories there or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch video episodes on YouTube at Social Justice Origin Stories, and I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. Video episodes are also available on the project website, socialjusticeoriginstories.com. Follow the project on Instagram at Social Justice Origin Stories. I'd love to hear about how you're engaging with the stories. Share your thoughts at socialjusticeoriginstories.com/contact or by emailing stories@socialjusticeoriginstories.com. To support the work of Social Justice Origin Stories, consider becoming a monthly patron. Your contributions will help keep this research going and support its mission. Visit patreon.com/socialjusticeoriginstories to learn more and make a contribution. Again, that's patreon.com/Social Justice Origin Stories. You can start or stop anytime. Social Justice Origin Stories is edited, hosted, and produced by me, Rolando Tompkins Jones. Many thanks to our storyteller this week and the many storytellers who have contributed to this project. And thank you for joining me this week. Take care.